again, welcome to everybody. As you know, our panel this evening brings together three leaders in the LGBTQI+ community who have paved the way for gay men and LGBTQI people in political leadership. We'll begin our discussion by asking each MP to share the story of how they became involved in politics, and then we'll ask our candid conversationists about the barriers and challenges they faced being a gay man in Parliament and in politics in general. Towards the end, as Kat said, we'll open up for 10 minutes of Q&A sessions. Okay, Larry, over to you.
Okay, well, let's begin with my friend, the Honourable Don Harwin, MLC. Don was first elected to the New South Wales Legislative Council in 1999 and became a Cabinet Minister in January 2017 after serving 6 years as President of the Legislative Council. His various portfolios include arts, heritage, Aboriginal affairs and the public service, and he was previously, I think, Minister for Water and Energy. Don's been a member of the Liberal Party since 1983 and, like me, has a deep interest in psephology and electoral distributions. And as a sideline, Don and I have successfully conspired to get Lord Howe Island into Alex's seat of North Sydney.
I deny it.
It was in our submissions. In November 2014, the Sydney Morning Herald reported that Don had disclosed to Parliament that he was gay, something his family, friends and colleagues had known for many years. What Don actually said was, "I rejoice in the opportunities gay and lesbian young people have today. Life is so different for them from what it was for me. Much has been achieved since then, and perhaps my travails in less happy times gave me the determination I need to pursue this role." Don has since told me it was one of the best things he ever did. Could we begin, Don, by asking you to share more of the story of how your journey from being a young Liberal in Irwin to that point in 2014 when you made that disclosure to Parliament and to now being the most senior minister in the New South Wales Legislative Council?
Well, thanks, Larry. It's great talking to you on Zoom, Larry, but not for the first time.
No.
Anyway, look, I grew up in southern Sydney and in a very religious family. I went to my local government high school. My father was a school teacher. Look, well, I was a bit different as a child, always. I wasn't heavily into sports. I loved reading. I loved history. I loved current affairs in particular. I suppose with someone who's really interested in history and current affairs, it was inevitable that sooner or later I'd become interested in the political process. Right through my early teen years, I followed politics very closely. And by the age of 16, I was pretty much ready to sign up myself. And went along to a meeting and listened to one of the local members out in the St George area. But my father told me I couldn't join the Young Liberals until after I'd done my HSC. And good boy that I was, I listened to Dad. And so I didn't join up till I got to uni and was, as you mentioned, Larry, in Irwin Young Liberals, where at my very first meeting, I met someone who's become a lifelong friend, Maurice Payne, the Foreign Minister. So, and there were just so many other friendships that I formed during politics as well. After uni, of course, I was very involved in student politics at uni as well. And I was on the SRC, believe it or not, with Paul Fletcher and Anthony Albanese. But there you go. After uni, I tutored for a while to some uni students. And I had 6 years, really interesting years working as a ministerial staffer for the Greiner and Fay governments. And in the middle of all of that, I was assistant campaign director down at party headquarters. Then when our government left office in 1995, I decided to set up my own business. and I was doing consultancy work across a whole range of different things, helping everyone from business to political parties to community organisations. It was 4 great years. I was living in Darlinghurst at the time, working from home. And it was during that period I decided I'd run for Parliament. Fortunately, on my first big push in 1999, 22 years ago, much to the surprise of a lot of people, I got elected. Why did I do it? I suppose, well, first of all, I had that fascination with the political process. But I think really it was honestly just my parents were very civic-minded people, a lot of work in various community organisations, taking on leadership roles. And it just always struck me that, you needed to get in and do your bit. And with that fascination about politics and with some passionate beliefs about how I thought the country needed to be run, that's what attracted me to politics. So 22 years, there's so many things that have happened. But I think what have been my proudest moments? Firstly, as someone who's really very strongly involved in election campaigning, putting together the whole campaign in South Coast in 2003 to win a seat off a Labor sitting member against the trend was wonderful. Ending up with a great person like Shelley Hancock in the Parliament. That was about that time I decided I quite like living on the South Coast, and I lived down there for about 18 years. The other great thing that I remember, of course, was that wonderful, I worked really closely. It's great how people work across the aisle in politics, and I've worked very closely for a long time with Penny Sharp, particularly before we came to government, on a number of conscience issues. And in particular, Penny and I largely did most of the grunt work to get the adoption reform bill, which was moved by Clover in the lower house and Penny in the upper house. We only ended up getting that bill through the lower house by a very tiny number of votes. So we really had to work incredibly hard. And at one point, Penny was worried that it wasn't going to get there, and she asked whether we should pull it or not. I thought about that, but we kept going, and we just got there. And then when we took it straight over to the upper house. We brought the house back, and we wanted to keep the momentum up and get it through the same night. And I have to say, it was an exhilarating night to have such an extraordinary piece of legislation passed through effectively a coalition of people who just cared about the issue across all the parties. I loved that. Obviously, now I'm minister, I get a chance to do a lot of good things, but this is probably not the time to go through them.
Can I ask you very quickly, when you were living in Darlinghurst, did you interact very much with the gay scene?
Well, Larry, I hear Shane Mallard laughing there.
I took him to the Albury Hotel a few times.
Shane and I used to live quite near each other, actually, and we did socialise quite a lot at local venues. Yes, I was very fond of the Albury. I think it's a great loss to Darlinghurst, and it's changed a lot, let me say, since the late 90s when I lived there and when Shane lived there. Yeah. But anyway,
okay.
Although he lived there longer.
Wonderful. Don, I'm delighted to hear of your involvement in the same-sex parenting and adoption, because I work with Bernardos, and you would perhaps have no idea of the huge difference same-sex parents made to the lives of some very, very wounded children.
Yeah.
Just fabulous. Yeah. And so I won't say there, but thank you. I'm really pleased to have heard that.
Well, I think Penny did an amazing thing getting Premier Kennelly to agree to let Clover's bill go forward. And once
Yes.
that happened, we then had to get out and get the numbers across all of the parties. And we just got there, thank goodness, because there was a push from some of the conservative elements of Labor and, of course, from other conservative elements in the party to stop it. And very close in the lower house.
Well, it was incredibly valuable, just wonderful. So anyhow, I need to go on now. Our next speaker is Shane, of course, MLC. Interestingly, Shane and I were both City of Sydney councillors from 2004 to 2012. So our careers have been interconnected. Shane was elected to the New South Wales Parliament Upper House at the general state election in 2015. He is a member of the Liberal Party of Australia. Prior to entering Parliament, Shane had an extensive career in local government and policy development in the areas of land use planning, infrastructure, transport and social engagement. He also had a successful small business, or has a successful small business. His background is in horticulture and hospitality, and he has a bachelor's degree from Macquarie Uni, majoring in Australian history and Australian politics. One of the things with Shane was from time to time to do with his horticultural degree, I've rung him up to say, this is what's happening to something on my balcony. What happens there? And he said to me, that's perfectly normal. And it's something I've never seen before in my life. So it was good to have this first-hand conversation. But getting back to government, he was the first elected in South Sydney Council, first elected in 2000, and subsequently to the City of Sydney Council in 2004. Shane is currently the temporary chair of committees in the New South Wales Legislative Council and is a member of the Upper House Standing Committee, namely the Social Issues Committee, and to which is his chair. And now over to you, Shane. Oh, do you want to talk a little bit about Glad Top? I was going to whack a little bit in there because I watch, of course, I follow you as a personal Facebook page and check out Glad Top all the time.
And my Instagram is pretty active on Glad Top too. Thanks, Marcel. I want to say, first of all, congratulations to yourself and your colleagues for establishing this forum, not tonight's, but the Politics in Colour organisation. It's a space that really was calling for some interactive engagement. So congratulations on that. I'm really pleased to be involved. Yeah, I grew up in Western Sydney. I'm a Penrith boy and moved into the city when I came out as a gay man in the mid-90s. But it was always calling me to go back. And I just went past Penrith to just past Katoomba and bought some acres there and 2 houses, an old dairy farm, and put my mum and dad in one of the houses. And so that's my base in the mountains. And on behalf of the government, I look after a number of duty seats out there in Western Sydney, and I assist Stuart Ayres at Penrith a lot. So it's a really engaged area for me. And between me being on the council, the City of Sydney, and before I was elected to the Upper House, I ran for the City of Sydney against the next speaker, Alex, who of course won it. But that gave me an opportunity to become the Chief of Staff to the Liberal Mayor of Liverpool and spend 2 wonderful years at Liverpool Council, engaging in that really rich community out there with a whole lot of different needs compared to city communities. And so, yeah, I've had a really good engagement with Western Sydney and different people. You asked me in the notes you sent me, how does gardening and plants cross over into politics? Well, it's a good cover for me to talk to people about things and break down barriers and stereotypes about what I might be like as a Liberal, or what I might be like as a member of government, or what I might be like as a gay man. Because gardening and the love of plants, the love of the environment, the love of the landscape, they're all linked. They transcend politics. Some parties try to claim it as their own. It's not true. All people in politics who are genuinely committed to politics care about those issues. And so that sort of covers that sort of intersection of that with me and for that. But I mean, I might just touch on my coming out story. Mine's a bit different to I think my colleagues here. I went to a state school, as I said. I saw myself as a young man, as a bisexual man. My mum and dad were very, and still are, very liberal, very open-minded about these things. There was no issue for them. Unlike where Don went to a conservative church, we had no church in our life. So I decided I had a midlife crisis quite early. It was when Don met me, pretty much, in terms of moving to Darlinghurst, and came out and moved into the city. I happened to be the young Liberal state president at the time, so it was a pretty tense, stressful time to do that. But I did it. Never had a breakdown, and of course, obviously, being an honest person about yourself, and worked out I was gay, and never looked back, and been very happy, and all my loved ones are all committed and happy about that too. But Don, when he was saying he was doing consulting, one of the people he consulted for free was me, and helping organise getting me on the South Sydney Council. So you can blame Don for getting me into local government, Marcel, because I remember in my garden shop in Darlinghurst, I had a garden shop with eating pizzas and plotting the plan to get me onto the council, which we succeeded. One of the proudest things over that period of time for me, and I love my local government time, was to have the honour as an openly gay man for the Liberal Party to agree and endorse me as their Lord Mayor's candidate. And 2 times I ran for Lord Mayor of Sydney for the party. Now, we knew we were up against it with the Larry Galbraith-Clover Moore combination, but nonetheless, we ran, and the media and the community took it seriously, and it was a great thing. And I experienced no prejudice in my party or in the community during that period. We've got a wonderfully tolerant city and generally tolerant state and country, and and it was just a great honour to do that. In terms of policy outcomes, I wear as a badge of honour that I was one of the first and strongest advocates for cycling infrastructure for our city. I still am. I chair the Parliamentary Friends of Active Transport, which we've just set up. My deputies are a Green member and a Labor member. And the Minister himself, Andrew Constance, is coming to an event we're doing in May. Active transport, as you know, Marcel, how much I pushed for it at the City of Sydney, has really come into its own in this city now. And I look around and look at the infrastructure, and I look at mums or carers with kids in the back on the back of bikes. You never saw that in 2000 in Sydney. It's really changed a lot in our city. The other one, if you just wanted 2 highlights, is the report that I've just completed on the gay and transgender hate crimes between 1970 and 2010 as the chair of the Social Issues Standing Committee. This is the second report. We did an interim report before the last election. This one's a little bit harder hitting than the last one. It's not tabled yet, but it has been speculated on in the media. And it comes out of an ACON report. And if there's anyone listening from ACON, congratulations on your work you did on your report around the gay hate crimes, and also the police parable report. And that report goes over what are definitely underestimated figures of 88 gay and 1 transgender hate murders that occurred in that period. But also we've explored in that report the fact that crimes against lesbians aren't recorded. And we had evidence to show that that's because often they're misclassified as domestic violence from an ex-male partner. And of course, transgender people were underreported because they often were classified as a sex worker or drug-related death. So it really is just the tip of the iceberg. It's not just about gay men, it's about the hate our communities, our diverse communities went through in that period. I'm very proud of that report. And it was fully supported by all the committee members. Labor, Green, Fred Nile was on it, believe it or not, all supported it. And that will be tabled in May. So I'm very proud of that report, and I'm hoping that the government will take the next step and pursue more vigorously these unsolved murders of men thrown off cliffs at Bondi. So that's pretty much wraps up a sort of a picture of my politics and my career and my involvement with the community. I got involved in politics through community service, just as Don said. My family are very much matriarchal. Dad was adopted, and there were very few men in my family, so as nanas and aunties, and they were very much Menzies women, you know, that believed the centre of the family unit was the centre of a healthy community, and to give back through not so much church with us, it was through Rotary and school service, doing working visits at schools and raising money for the school. And through Rotary, the youth wing of that, I met a guy called Michael Owen, Michael was 24 when I met him, and he was the member for Bass Hill when Neville ran, retired. Extraordinarily, the Liberals won Bass Hill, which was a safe Labor seat in those days. It was the premier seat. And Michael said to me famously, you're great what you're doing in your community, the work you're doing around the bicentenary and all that sort of stuff I was doing. He said, but you really want to make a difference, you've got to get involved where you control the levers or have a say over the levers of helping people's lives more strongly. And you've got the skills to be a community leader in politics, whether it's local government, state or federal. And he introduced me to the Young Liberals. That's when I met Don at the Royal Automobile Club and Maurice and Joe Hockey and Brogden and all the rest of them. And never looked back from that either. So it's been a great journey with political colleagues who think similarly to me too.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Shane. Now we move on to our final panelist for the evening, and that's Alex Greenwich, MP. Now, I've known Alex probably since the early years of the marriage equality campaign. I think one of our first conversations was when you and Peter Urmson came to talk to me about the possibility of getting the city support for lighting up the Harbour Bridge with the word equality, which I think eventually did happen several years later after the plebiscite was carried. I also think I was probably one of the first people who Alex talked to outside his family about running for Parliament when it looked like Clover might be forced out by the Get Clover Bill, as it's very commonly known. And of course, Alex was elected to Parliament for the first time in 2012. Outside Parliament, Alex is probably, as I mentioned, best known for his leadership of the successful Yes campaign that delivered marriage equality in 2017. And if you want to know more about that, I suggest you haven't already done so, read the book he co-authored with Shirlene Robertson about that campaign. It's actually quite a good read. You may have also seen Alex suffering sleep deprivation on a park bench in the SBS series, Filthy, Rich and Homeless. And this experience, I think, strengthened his resolve for the need for action to address Australia's homelessness crisis. But as Alex sort of revealed during the abortion debate, his first experience of political activism was a letter his grandmother shared with him when he was 10 years old. It was a letter she had written to the United States President George H.W. Bush, outraged at his anti-abortion stance. Almost 3 decades later, in 2019, Alex introduced the bill which decriminalised abortion in New South Wales. Anyway, I think now we'll invite Alex to talk about his journey to politics as a gay man.
Thank you very much, Larry, and it's wonderful to be on this Zoom call with Don and Shane, yourself, and of course Marcel, and thank you to all the participants who are joining us. My first exposure to politics, Australian politics, was really through the marriage equality campaign and my involvement as a volunteer with Australian marriage equality. That involved me going down to Canberra a lot. I really didn't like Canberra. I really didn't like federal parliament, didn't like the vibe, the feel of it. And certainly I find it to be very different to state parliament, which is a warmer, more collegial environment. And as you alluded to, Larry, legislation passed the parliament, which said Clover could no longer be the Lord Mayor and the member for Sydney. I, like many of my constituents, were quite outraged by that. Contacted Clover's office and said, I feel like my vote has been taken away. What can I do? Inevitably, that turned into what I can do is I could run. For that, it was quite an intense process, meeting with you, meeting with obviously Clover, meeting with the electorate office staff, and I spent three months interning as well in Clover's electorate office in Oxford Street, and then obviously contested the election. So I owe my political career to the conflict between Barry O'Farrell and Clover to some extent, but then have been have obviously faced two other elections and done so successfully. And I'm really grateful to have a good working relationship with Don and with Shane. And when I think back to that 2012 by-election, it was a pretty intense time. But how good was it that the two main candidates, Shane and myself, were both gay men, and it really was not a feature of that campaign. In fact, it was the Greens who had the old straight dude as their candidate, your former colleague Marcel and Shane Chris Harris. So I think that was quite a historic nature of the by-election. And I do remember some guy coming up to me in out canvassing and saying to me, "There's no way I'll support you. I'm completely opposed to gay marriage." And I said to him, "Well, you're gonna find voting in this by-election quite difficult. The Liberal candidate's also gay. The Greens are the other main competition. Labor's not running, so you're a bit lost." But I have to say that I have really valued the opportunity to be in New South Wales Parliament, to work with colleagues across the political spectrum. Don spoke about the multi-partisan work to see same-sex adoption pass. It's wonderful that we've been able to see that happen with the extinguishment of prior homosexual convictions, a process that was led by Bruce Notley Smith, the member for Coogee, a trailblazer in his own right, absolutely. We also saw that multi-partisan effort with the apologies that had been made, and also indeed with the decriminalisation of abortion in 2019. So, I have been pleasantly surprised that New South Wales Parliament is a great workplace. People work really well together, and there are a group of us who are able to work together to really progress important reforms for the LGBTI community and make sure that our community has a voice at the table.
And let me tell you what.
Okay.
Right. Have we finished? I think someone.
I think I've spoken. I've said enough. Anything else that you'd like me to cover, Larry?
No. I think the other thing at the time from memory, you're running a recruitment business with your mother. I mean, how different is politics to the business you were involved in before?
So the industry I was in was banking and finance recruitment, and that's all about negotiation and understanding people's motivations, and which is a key part of our job in Macquarie Street. It's a role that's all about people as well. So yeah, it did teach me well. I am really I enjoyed working in that industry for about a decade. But it was also time for me to move on in my career, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So it was really interesting timing, running for the seat. The day before, the very day before Clover did her valedictory speech, I was in Canberra in Parliament House after an unsuccessful vote under the then Gillard government for same-sex marriage that was defeated. Had to front a media conference saying, we're going to get there, we're not giving up, etc. Knowing that the next day I was sort of stepping down from that role and seeking the endorsement from Clover after her speech. So that was a very intense time, a very intense week in my life. It was a very short by-election. I recall something like 3 weeks. But I'm really glad I decided to do that, and really glad to be in the workplace that I'm in.
If I could ask each of you, and I think my question to Shane and Don is going to be slightly different to my question for Alex. You both belong to a political party which still has members who are hostile to gay issues, and who historically, even back in the early 80s, many of its members, along with members of the Labor Party, opposed homosexual law reform. How do you, to what extent do you still find in a personal sense, homophobia within your political parties, and how do you deal with it? Or are people these days incredibly polite?
Well, I'd say that it's isolated in terms of incidents. I mean, generally speaking, it's been isolated. My experience, my whole career in the party. I mean, I had when I was being endorsed as the Liberal Lord Mayoral candidate, and it has to go through a vetting process in our party. Someone famously said, and it was leaked to me, that that she didn't have a problem with me, but she had a problem with my lifestyle choices. Which I said, was that because I like mid-century modern furniture? I said, is that the furniture she doesn't like? I wasn't quite sure what lifestyle choices are. But, you know, isolated incidents like that, I think are shown up for what they are. In fact, they're not the norm. And when that happens, people jump to your defence. But it's very rare, though, these days. I don't experience much now. I know Don might have a different perspective. He goes back further.
Well, let's see. I think political parties are not that much different to just society generally, really. And as Larry says, it's both political parties and the National Party as well. But I have to say, when I was pre-selected 22 years ago, it was quite different to what it is now. And that was just in the wake of the, excuse me, the Wood Royal Commission panic, if I could put it that way, or should I say not so much. I mean, the Royal Commission was an important thing and a useful thing, but it also led to a bit of a panic, and that about pedophilia and people trying to equate it with homosexuality, and so that was a difficult period. But and it would be fair to say that when I first ran 22 years ago, people believed by attacking me for my sexuality they'd defeat me. But the interesting thing is, even back then, there were a lot of people who were offended by it, and it actually won me support rather than cost me support. So I think that a lot has changed, and that's good. And that's something, Larry, which when you introduced me, you pointed to. And many of the young people who were just rejoicing in and having wonderful lives these days were people in youth political movements. And it excited me. It was a delight to see it. And I'm so glad that society is very different these days.
I mean, to what extent, Alex, have you encountered homophobia? I mean, I imagine there would have been pushback when you were sort of lobbying for marriage equality, for example.
Look, in terms of my role as a member of parliament, I have not experienced that. You know, with amongst colleagues, I find everybody to be welcoming. People do want to ask questions. Where my office is located on Macquarie Street, I'm next to a lot of national MPs, and you know they like to tell me their views about Mardi Gras, which they all enjoy and like watching, which is a good thing to hear. You know, during the Yes campaign, I did have a bit of a tough time for 2 weeks. My office had to close because there was a concerted effort of calls to abuse my staff. We had to deal with some death threats. It was a pretty intense time. But that was in the context of a national debate about marriage equality. My name was on everything that was mailed out. So you know, I was a bit of a target, but New South Wales Police were great during that time. But within the building, within my community, obviously being Sydney, it's not something that I have had to face. And you know, I think it is important though to acknowledge that that has not always been the case, and the work that Don and Shane and Bruce and Penny and others have done, not only to provide that visibility, but to really mentor and encourage other LGBT people to work in politics and run for political office has really made a difference. You know, there are LGBT people all throughout Macquarie Street and all throughout APH, and that is I don't think that is by accident. And going back to the Yes campaign, we can't also underestimate the role that young liberals, LGBT liberals, Rainbow Labor played in really the door knocking effort, the strategy effort, the having conversations, the holding public forums. Obviously, within, as Don said, I think the parties probably reflect society. In society, yes, there is homophobia. But I, in my time in politics and throughout the Yes campaign and marriage equality campaign, we wouldn't have got there if it wasn't for members of the Liberal Party, the National Party, and the Labor Party. And it's important that we remember that and celebrate that.
I mean, for quite a long time, for most of history, up until probably the last 20 or 30 years, 40 years, homosexuals have been painted as being deviant perverts living in the shadows, as very much as the other. And one of the things that the gay movement, by making gay men and lesbians visible, has helped overcome a lot of those prejudices. And I'm just wondering, to what extent do you think your own visibility has helped contribute to lessening those prejudices? And I did say earlier, are people more inclined to be polite simply because exhibiting prejudice is no longer seen as being a particularly polite thing to do?
I wouldn't say that, Larry. I think, sadly, there are people who, someone once described it to me as the last acceptable prejudice. I think, frankly, having a go at an LGBTI or Q plus person still isn't seen as quite as serious as, say, attacking a Jew or attacking a Muslim or being racist. I think we still see that. I think we still see that in the way the media sometimes sensationalizes particular stories, and I think that's still a concern, but I say that in the full knowledge that things have just changed so much, and we do have a lot to be thankful for, but there are still reasons why all of us in the LGBTIQ community should be vigilant about the issues that still need to be addressed.
Following on from what Don said, and when I did get elected, that the headline in the Daily Telegraph was "Gay Party Boy Wins Clover's Seat." Now that a straight candidate would not have got that same headline. That said, it was accurate reporting from the Daily Telegraph, really. So
you weren't a party boy; you're an independent.
So we do have a question from the audience. Given the mention earlier of the colour and gender of the panel, we certainly saw some comments around that on social media. What, from your experience, can you or we all do now to give a leg up to transgender, diverse, intersex people of colour and offer them opportunities to be more involved and be represented in politics? So that's a question to the politicians. Yeah,
I'm happy to have a start at that, and just wanted to make the initial comment that that it would, not that long ago, we wouldn't be able to have a panel of 3 out gay men in politics, because that didn't exist. It is wonderful that we have come so far that this is not a diverse panel now, whereas previously it would have been a very controversial panel. It is critical, though, the role that, so we've spoken so much about the importance of visibility. What we don't have visibility of in Australian politics is trans and gender diverse people in elected office. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to change that, and to support trans and gender diverse people to run for elected office, and to help them along the way. When Australian marriage equality wrapped up, we had some funds left over. We provided some of those funds to Women for Election Australia to do a scholarship specific to trans women, to make sure that trans women interested in politics could be trained up and supported. So that's one clear way that can happen.
I'll have a stab for those. Obviously, I've spent a large amount of my time over the 37 years that I've been involved in active politics, mentoring people, including a lot of women, in particular, a lot of women candidates. Look, I think the most important thing is if you have an interest in politics, and please excuse me for saying this, Alex, as an independent, but look, if you have an interest in politics, if you're interested in issues, if you feel passionate about it, and you think there might be, as part of your future, a capacity to work in politics or even be a parliamentarian, for heaven's sake, join a political party. It doesn't matter which one it is, just join. And put yourself out there. Yeah, okay, perhaps it's not so out there to just be a pale male and stale gay politician these days. But tell you what, it wasn't that way 37 years ago. And I had a passion to do it, and I just joined and I did it. And I will always put my hand out to help people who have the courage to do that, who might perhaps not fit into the same sort of cookie cutter model of your average politician.
And I can't really add much more than endorse Don's comments there. What I don't appreciate is the role of staffing as a profession in government and in opposition. There are long-term staff members who don't go into Parliament but contribute so much to policy development in oppositional government, and we really need more of those. And so that's a good area to start for diverse people to get involved in politics. It's just come and get involved in office work, which leads on to community work and then leads on to opportunities if you want them for Parliament. I also mentor 2 young women at the moment in the Young Liberal movement, and I'm honoured to do that.
That's really great to hear. Thank you for sharing that. One of the reasons we established Politics in Colour, and we originally started in the women's space, and we decided to take it out into to broaden our perspective. We wanted to be able to support people from marginalised communities that weren't just focused on empowering women. And what we've seen, and we've only been going for a couple of months, what we've seen is that there is a really great appetite and a really great momentum from the broader community to see more diversity in politics.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it's really fantastic that we can create these platforms. Thank God for Zoom during COVID, and it's been wonderful just reaching out to marginalised communities, underserved communities, and to be able to raise people's voices and hear their concerns, and also support them in understanding, the processes of learning more about political citizenry, understanding how to get elected, developing courses to help people understand how to get elected. There's been an enormous amount of support from organisations, charities, politicians, and universities as well. So it's really great time. So yeah, we imagine that, we hope that with all of our efforts, that we're going to see a much more diverse Parliament, much more diverse councils in the very near future. So Marcel, I believe you have a question.
No, I don't have a question. I simply wanted to say that some of us were more worried about this process, as I explained to our participants, than others about this process creating antagonism. And the fact that it's been so successful really comes back to our participants. I'm so grateful to these three men who've come on board, because they've shown us tonight that, remember we talked about RISE back with Mardi Gras. They talked about RISE, and so what we've been able to do tonight is really contribute to a more diverse parliament and more equal representation across Australian electorates by starting with this group of men. But as Kath has said, we're going to work with women of colour. We're going to work with women who are from multicultural backgrounds, but we also want to work with people with disabilities and anybody who's marginalised in any way, shape or form. I now am living with a disability, and I was pleased to hear that Don's involved with that. And so there are areas where we will continue to talk to people who are struggling in any way, shape or form to have their voice heard. And I'm absolutely delighted that Shane mentioned that people can come up through the office. I know powerful, powerful people that one might say are almost the power behind the throne, who have such great policy ideas and share those ideas with people that who are in power, and I admire them enormously. So that's about all I need to say, and I'm very happy to have anyone else add anything to that. So, but thank you to everybody for being here tonight.
I want to follow up on Don's observations about getting involved in politics with a question. And what I'm about to say, I will deny I've ever said, for reasons that become obvious. And that
this is recorded, Larry. So
Don is correct in a sense, notwithstanding who I work for and notwithstanding Alex's experience. It is true that most members of Parliament are representatives of political parties, and most of the gay men and lesbians who are currently members of Parliament, and there are those in the federal Parliament as well, are also there as members of political parties. And unlike Alex, whose initial political involvement was with marriage equality, most of their involvement was around issues other than gay issues. And I'm just wondering, to what extent should people who may come from marginalised backgrounds of difference, to what extent is important that they involve themselves in the broad sweep of issues? To what extent also do they need to prove themselves more than, say, the heterosexual Caucasian middle-class male? And to what extent do you think political parties are welcoming these days?
Well, that's about a triple-barreled question, Larry.
We're not answering it.
I think in Parliament, for those of us in Parliament, it's incredibly important not to just be single-issue campaigners, and even those who come in as independents know that they can't be single-issue campaigners as well. And Alex, to his credit, has had advocacy over a very wide range of issues, and even some of the colleagues that Shane and I have in parties like the Animal Justice Party, they maintain an interest and work on a wide range of issues beyond their core concerns about the importance of looking after animals. So I would say that, and I would say for people who want to become involved in political parties, if you just join for one reason and advocate on one issue, well, yes, go ahead, good luck, and you may pull it off, and it will be a wonderful moment for you. But generally, I think that it is important to have a suite of things that you want to pursue. But I think we definitely need more people of a disability, of colour, people who I think, as Marcel's described them, are marginalised, because visibility is very important, and very important in terms of breaking down stereotypes. So that's important too. And we need more diversity in our political parties. I have to say, I'm delighted that at the moment the Young Liberals are being led by an absolutely sparkling and on the ball young woman called Day Wu, who I met yesterday afternoon, a young woman of Chinese origin, which I think is a fantastic thing for the Young Liberals. And I'd like to see even more diversity, but it's time to let some others have a go on this one. Shane?
Well, we look around our upper house chamber and it's pretty much dominated by white men and white women, and doesn't reflect the diversity of our community. And we've had some notable exceptions on both sides of politics, but they're just exceptions. And we look around and there's no people from Aboriginal descent in the upper house. We have, I think we've got two Asian descent members, 2 men, one Muslim, but it's not really representative of the community. And one of my Asian friends said to me, it's just all white faces in there, when he was watching it on Zoom one night when I was in the chair. And that disturbs me, that this is a second generation Asian Australian, that they see the parliament as not representative of the broader community. But that said, I feel that next wave will be starting to push to get more representation in the parliaments. We've got a number of dynamic Asian young men and women in our party, as Don just said, our young Liberal president. So we need to mentor them, bring them forward at our own expense. But we're sort of at the end of our careers, so we can do that and get more diversity. One thing I will say about pigeonholing is, I remember when I was running for pre-selection for the 2015 election, and a power broker in the party said to me, if we put you in the parliament, all you're going to do is campaign on gay issues because you're homosexual. And I said, well, really, after HEROC reforms, after all the reforms in New South Wales, I said, there's only one issue left, and that's, of course, gay marriage at that time. I said, and that's a federal issue. But I will say that there's lots of issues still for our community to be dealing with. The gay hate inquiry, which has been going over the last 2 parliaments, very important work, unfinished business for our community that I've been doing. The whole HIV world that we're in now, how much it's changed so dramatically and wonderfully, is very much driven by Parliament, by politics, by the Health Minister, Gillian Skinner in the past, and the current Health Minister, and bipartisan support. So there are still issues for us, and there's still prejudice out there that we have to always be on top of, that pops its head up, like in the education bill that's being talked about at the moment and so forth. So, so I was very careful to not get pigeonholed on gay issues. They seem to come to my lap. That's fine. I relish doing the work on them. But I've also got a diverse portfolio of other interests, as I mentioned in my earlier statement, active transport, public housing. I was born in public housing, so I appreciate the renewal we're doing at the moment. Infrastructure, Western Sydney. So yeah, keep a very broad palette for me.
And I guess I'll just dovetail on that the topic of pigeonholing. As I said in the initial by-election, it was two gay men, and I really don't remember any points of policy difference when it came to LGBTI stuff between Shane and I, or Shane and Chris and I, the Greens candidate. And following on from Clover's work, there was no way the Sydney electorate was going to elect someone who's just going to do gay stuff. Clover had such a broad record of achievement, whether it was on education, health, the legislation to see the injecting centre happen. That is really the expectation. And I know we've spoken a lot about political parties. I'll talk a little bit about independents. To be a successful independent, you have to represent the interests of the community that elect you. the diversity of those interests. You have to work with government, you have to hold them accountable, and you have to deliver results. If you do that as independents who do that get re-elected, independents who don't do that don't get re-elected. So, it is a challenge because we don't have the party structures around us. Obviously, within the parties, there are different opportunities. But I guess, if people are interested in running as an independent candidate, it is possible. But you can't do it as a single issue candidate. You can't, really just get elected on the back of a protest. You really actually need to deliver for your community. And if you do that, and if you communicate that, you'll continue to hopefully be successful. If you don't, you won't get re-elected. And there's plenty of examples of that.
That's a really great insight from an independent MP. Thank you for that. I actually have one question to all of the panelists. I'm a bona fide introvert. I really don't like being on a stage or having a microphone or a camera in my face. And so I have a perception that if you do want to move into political leadership, then you must, have a natural extroverted personality. I mean, to what extent would you say that that's true?
Oh, I think for lower house members, that very much tends to be the case. I think really leaders tend to be very extroverted, and to be a leader in your community and to inspire a following which goes beyond any party brand, you have to be a charismatic figure, particularly if you're an independent or a party member in a marginal seat. And so I think that's right. It's a bit different in the upper house. We're a little bit more cerebral in the upper house, but I don't know if I call myself an extrovert as such, but probably not really. But maybe you're onto something there, Kat.
You have a different opinion, Shane?
Well, I've always been a little bit of an extrovert. I'm the oldest child, so I've always been a leader in my family. I think listening, confidence. I always wanted to be a suburban solicitor or country town solicitor because all I want to do is help people with their problems. So I think that people can perceive that when you're like that, and then they'll follow you and they'll support you. In my upper house role, I do a lot of shadow work in lower house Labor seats. So I get to know all the community groups and community issues quite well and do local media. And yeah, I think I'm not necessarily, I don't think I'm super extroverted, but I'm confident.
I would answer that to say that, every successful working environment or workplace of which Parliament is requires a variety of different personality types. I think Don's absolutely right that in the lower house, people are more likely to be extrovert. If you were an introvert, it would be a very hard environment to operate in. But it also depends how you define political leadership. Some of the smartest people in the building, some of the most effective people in the building, as Shane said, are actually staff, policy advisors, people who are in chief of staff positions or senior policy advisor positions. And it could be that their personality type is more likely to be a bit more introverted than ours. But that doesn't mean that they're not in a role of political leadership. They certainly are.
I will add, I don't think I've known the Premier since Young Liberal days, but she certainly wasn't an extroverted person at all in those earlier years. I think she's developed that skill and confidence as a minister and then Premier, but she was not an extroverted person at all.
Yeah.
And I think people warm to that. People warm to that sincerity from her when she's doing media about COVID or bushfires or whatever. And they gave her a lot of rope in regards to or slack in regards to the stuff that went on with the ICAC. But it's because of her sincerity that they detect genuine sincerity. from her.
Mm. That's really great to hear. Yeah, thank you.
Well, of course, Alex, you've self-described yourself as a media tartan more than one occasion, I think.
I don't think I've used those words, but sure, I give.
Oh, yes, I can remember
at
the
Larry.
occasion when you did.
Of course, you can.
Okay, Larry, over to you for a final question. We've just gone over close to 8:10, so we need to wind up now.
Well, there are a couple of, there was a question here earlier, which I think is worthwhile asking. Does the panel believe it is more difficult to be a gay member of parliament in rural regional New South Wales? How can we support LGBTIQ plus people in regional New South Wales who are considering public office?
Look, I think unquestionably that's true, Larry. If you look at the lower house, the openly gay lower house members that have been elected, Bruce was from Coogee, Alex from Sydney, in the federal parliament, you've had Trevor Evans in central Brisbane, Tim Wilson in Goldstein, again pretty close to the city, Trent in North Sydney. I don't think that's an accident. By accident, they're seats that had extraordinarily high yes votes in all of them. But I just don't think it's the country. I think there would be parts pretty much anywhere that voted strongly no would be problematic. And as we all know, there were parts of Sydney that voted more strongly no than parts of the country. But look, I lived for 18 years on the South Coast, and you know, during that time I had some hairy experiences. I worried one night when I was out working on an election campaign that I was going to be suffer violence. So the country is a bit different, but I think even as the yes vote showed, even the country's changing as well.
Mm.
I suppose I'm just wondering whether it might be different for country seats based on university towns like Wagga or Armidale.
Probably, inevitably, I think. But even so, while they're very important for the economies of a large number of regional centres, students and staff are still an important part, but not necessarily a huge part of a 50,000 plus voting state electorate and a 110,000 voting federal electorate.
Does the panel have any tips or insights on how the gay community or advocates should engage with the political process to maximise the chance of success on future gay issues?
Well, I'll have a go first, but I have to say I think the gay community has by and large been incredibly successful at doing that. I think groups like ACON in particular, under the exemplary and wonderful Nick Parkhill, do an extraordinarily good job advocating on a wide range of issues, and there are plenty of other good groups as well. So I don't actually think the gay community does a bad job at that. I think they do a sensational job, and I pay tribute to all of the people who over the years have been involved in organisations like Mardi Gras and the Lobby and ACON, because I really think they've done a great job at actively advocating for our interests.
I agree with that, Don, and there was a conscious effort made in the 90s, like when I went on the board of the AIDS Council for 5 years and Vice President of FAO, those bodies to broaden out their political base, not just go down Labor or the Greens, and to have a broad political membership and access, and Mardi Gras too. And that in the 90s came forward to being a very mature lobbying organisation that other organisations look at, like ACON is a great example of broad-based advocacy.
Yeah, the door is in New South Wales Parliament is always open to the LGBTI community. Shane is the chair of the Parliamentary Friends of the LGBTI community. We've had multiple sessions with different World Pride. We've had multiple sessions with different advocacy groups already. So I guess the message is, just don't be afraid to contact us. And we'll all work together in a multi-partisan way to get things done.